Human beings invented agriculture, refrigeration, and entire global supply chains just to make sure food is available whenever we want it. And somehow, people still manage to treat a sandwich like it's a chemistry experiment designed by a raccoon with a credit card. Some of these decisions are confusing, some are horrifying, and a few make you wonder if common sense quietly left the kitchen years ago. And the worst part, the truly unbelievable food crimes haven't even started yet. 1. I'd like to begin with one of humanity's greatest culinary achievements, microwaving a hard-boiled egg. Now, if you've never tried this, congratulations, your survival instincts are functioning normally. But somewhere out there, a woman decided the microwave was simply a faster version of patience. She put the egg in, waited, and then bit into it. And the egg exploded in her face like a protein-based landmine. Turns out, when you trap steam inside a sealed egg and then heat it, you're not making a snack. You're assembling a tiny edible grenade. Doctors treated her for burns while probably trying very hard not to laugh. The lesson here is simple. If your lunch requires the same physics as a pressure cooker bomb, maybe reconsider your cooking strategy. Humanity invented ovens, stovetops, and common sense. She chose chaos. 2. Somewhere in the world, a man looked at a handful of coins and thought, you know what would really make me feel richer? Internal banking. So he swallowed them. Multiple coins. Not one, not two, a handful. The logic appears to have been that if money is good, money inside you must be even better. Unfortunately, the human digestive system is not a piggy bank. It's more like a highly opinionated plumbing system that immediately files a complaint when you start feeding it spare change. The man ended up in the ER with an intestinal blockage and a medical bill that probably cost more than the entire coin collection he tried to deposit. That's the thing about food. It's designed to be edible. Metal currency is not. But apparently, when people say invest in yourself, someone always takes it a little too literally. 3. One man decided the modern kitchen had a design flaw, not enough fireworks. His solution was to microwave his smartphone after dropping it in water. Now, most of us know the classic trick. Rice. Put the phone in rice. But this guy looked at a machine designed to excite water molecules at high speed and thought, perfect drying technology. What followed was less drying process and more small indoor explosion. The phone overheated, burst, and embedded hot plastic fragments in his arm. Imagine explaining that to a doctor. Yes, I attempted to cook my electronics. Microwaves are incredible devices. They can heat leftovers, popcorn, and occasionally someone's ego when they realize they've mistaken a kitchen appliance for a repair shop. Technology is amazing, but it cannot fix the one bug humanity still hasn't patched: user error. 4. Then we have the genius who decided to slow cook a potato using his car's exhaust pipe. I want you to picture the thought process here. A man stands in a parking lot holding a potato, staring at a car like it's a Michelin-starred chef. Yes, he thinks, this machine powered by combustion fumes is basically an oven. So he wedges the potato into the tailpipe and waits, because apparently he saw baked potato and thought the engine block was the missing ingredient. The result was not a delicious roadside meal. It was burns, embarrassment, and a trip to the emergency room. Cars are good at transportation, mild pollution, and occasionally playing terrible music through blown speakers. What they are not good at is being a kitchen, but I admire the creativity. It takes a special kind of mind to look at a toxic exhaust system and think, dinner. 5. Someone once decided to win $10 by snorting crushed chili powder. $10. Not a life-changing amount, not even enough for lunch in most cities, but apparently the promise of a cheap meal is enough for the human brain to temporarily uninstall dignity. So the challenge began. A line of chili powder, a deep breath, immediate regret. Chili powder, as it turns out, is designed to make your mouth burn, not your sinuses feel like a volcanic eruption. The result was a nosebleed, extreme pain, and a hospital visit. And I love the economics of this. Imagine explaining the bill to your insurance company. Yes, I risked permanent nasal damage for the price of a fast food combo meal. Somewhere, a ghost of common sense watched this happen and quietly packed its bags. 6. One of my personal favorites involves a man who attempted to open a beer bottle with his teeth. Now, technically, this is food related because beer is, depending on your life choices, a beverage or a lifestyle. The man placed the cap between his teeth and applied force like he was starring in a low budget action movie. The bottle cap did not move. His two front teeth did. Dentists everywhere collectively sighed because they know this story ends with someone sitting in a chair explaining how it seemed like a good idea at the time. Bottle openers exist. They cost about $1. Your teeth cost thousands. But apparently, the thrill of improvisation outweighed the value of basic dental architecture. The bottle survived untouched. His smile did not. Sometimes evolution gives us tools, and sometimes we use them like idiots. 7. Then there was the woman who attempted to give a wild squirrel a glitter manicure. Yes, a manicure for a squirrel. I don't know what part of the plan she thought was going to work. Wild animals are not exactly known for their spa etiquette, but she approached the creature like it had booked a nail appointment. The squirrel, shocked by this sudden beauty treatment, responded in the only logical way: full force bite. She ended up needing medical treatment and probably a lecture about wildlife boundaries. And honestly, I respect the squirrel here. It handled the situation with the clarity humans often lack. If a stranger grabs your paw and tries to apply glitter, you bite them. This is not complicated. Nature operates on simple rules. Humans, meanwhile, looked at a rodent and thought, let's give it a makeover. 8. At some point, a father decided the best way to hang Christmas lights was with a trampoline, a staple gun, and an aggressive misunderstanding of gravity. I want you to imagine the brainstorming session. Ladders are too boring, he thinks. What if I launch myself toward the roof like a festive missile? So he starts bouncing, staple gun in hand, probably feeling like the MacGyver of holiday decorations. Physics, however, does not care about holiday spirit. The result was a sprained ankle, a staple in his thigh, and a house that remained tragically undecorated. This is the thing about food and holidays. They bring families together. Sometimes they also bring emergency rooms together because nothing says Christmas like explaining to a nurse that you tried to staple lights to your roof while airborne. 9. One guy decided to test a new nail gun by firing it at a wooden plank he was holding, inches from his face. This technically counts as food stupidity because the entire scenario happened during a backyard barbecue. People were grilling burgers. Someone was probably making potato salad. And in the middle of this peaceful suburban feast, a man chose to conduct a power tool experiment. The nail went through the board and into his nose. Congratulations, the grill is still cooking, the burgers are fine, and Dave has become a human bulletin board. The barbecue continued, but now with the added entertainment of explaining to paramedics how a cookout turned into a construction accident. It's impressive how quickly humans can turn a normal meal into an episode of How Did We Get Here? 10. A man once tried to retrieve a bag of chips from inside a vending machine by sticking his arm up the slot. Now, vending machines are essentially giant metal boxes designed by engineers who fully expect people to attempt this exact maneuver, and they plan accordingly. His arm got stuck. Firefighters had to dismantle the machine while a crowd watched the world's slowest snack heist unfold. And the best part? He still didn't get the chips. That's the level of failure we're dealing with here. Imagine risking public humiliation, emergency services, and your dignity, all for a snack that costs $2. Vending machines are patient. They wait decades for this moment. And when it comes, they clamp down like a mechanical life lesson. 11. A man once tried to swallow a sewing needle to prove a magic trick was easy. Now, technically, this was done during a dinner party because nothing enhances a meal like amateur surgery. He swallowed the needle and immediately discovered that the human body is not built for card trick level stunts. Doctors had to remove it surgically, which is the least magical ending imaginable. The audience at that dinner party probably just wanted dessert. Instead, they got a live demonstration of Darwinian testing. Magic tricks are performed by professionals who understand sleight of hand. This man understood sleight of throat, and the only thing that disappeared was his common sense. 12. One man believed the perfect way to fix earwax buildup was to hold a lit birthday candle near his ear. Because apparently candles are now medical devices, the idea came from something called ear candling, which sounds like a spa treatment but mostly functions as a way to accidentally glue wax to parts of your body that were doing just fine before. The candle melted wax directly onto his eardrum, which doctors then had to remove. Imagine explaining that moment in the hospital. Yes, doctor, I attempted to treat my ear like a scented dessert. The human body has doctors, medicine, and entire fields of science dedicated to health. And yet, people still walk into the bathroom and invent medieval treatments like they're auditioning for a history documentary. 13. Someone once decided the fastest way to get their letter back from a mailbox was to stick their entire head inside it. This happened after mailing a breakup letter. Regret kicked in, as it often does with both relationships and impulsive decisions, so he shoved his head inside the federal mailbox slot. And then, surprise, he couldn't get it out. Firefighters had to cut the mailbox open while neighbors watched what can only be described as public humiliation theater. Imagine explaining to the Postal Service that you attempted to become part of the mail system. The breakup probably still happened, but now it came with a bonus memory. Your ex watching you on the news with your head stuck in government property. 14. One patient arrived at the ER complaining about a cold sensation in a very personal area. After some questioning, doctors learned he had used a frozen hot dog as a cooling device. Now let's pause here. Humanity has invented ice packs, cold showers, and the radical concept of simply waiting. But no, he chose processed meat, frozen meat. The human body is not designed for sub-zero sausage experiments. Doctors treated frostbite and probably had a long conversation about life choices. Somewhere, a hot dog company executive felt a disturbance in the force. Their product had been repurposed in ways marketing never predicted. And honestly, this is why warning labels exist, because without them, someone will eventually decide deli meat is medical equipment. 15. Finally, we have the man who decided to vacuum his cat as part of a grooming routine. Now, technically, this relates to food because the entire disaster happened in a kitchen where the cat had just eaten. The man looked at a household vacuum cleaner, a machine famous for terrifying animal, and thought, yes, this will calm the situation. The cat responded with the fury of a tiny clawed tornado, scratches everywhere, stitches required, and a pet that will never trust household appliances again. Cats already believe humans are incompetent servants. This event simply confirmed their theory. Somewhere, that cat is still telling the story to other cats. He tried to groom me with a vacuum, and the other cats nod in silent agreement. Humans truly have no idea what they're doing. 16. I once watched a man attempt to cook pasta in a coffee maker, which is one of those moments where you realize humanity has access to the entire internet and still chooses chaos. His logic was simple. A coffee maker heats water. Pasta needs hot water. Therefore, this is basically Italian engineering. So he snapped spaghetti in half, shoved it into the filter basket, filled the reservoir, and pressed brew like he was about to invent a Michelin star breakfast. What actually happened was a slow, mechanical tragedy. The noodles softened, twisted into sad little knots, clogged the machine, and created something that looked less like pasta and more like a science experiment gone wrong. The coffee maker, which had spent its life politely brewing morning caffeine, suddenly found itself forced into culinary crimes it never signed up for. Somewhere in Italy, a grandmother probably felt a disturbance in the force. 17. I once saw a guy try to deep fry ice cream at home after watching a 5-second TikTok that made it look like culinary wizardry. Now restaurants manage this trick by freezing the ice cream into a rock, coating it in layers of batter, and lowering it into oil with the precision of a bomb squad technician. This man skipped all of that. He scooped a perfectly normal spoonful of ice cream, dropped it straight into a pot of boiling oil, and watched it instantly transform into what can only be described as sweet dairy soup. The oil sputtered, the ice cream vanished, and the kitchen smelled like a dessert shop that had experienced a small industrial accident. He stood there staring at the pot like gravity had personally betrayed him. Somewhere a chef wept quietly because this wasn't cooking. This was a live demonstration of what happens when confidence outruns knowledge by about 10 miles. 18. I once heard about a man who tried to grill a frozen pizza without removing the cardboard circle underneath it. Now, to be fair, frozen pizza instructions do contain a lot of words, and reading is apparently the most physically exhausting activity known to mankind. So he slid the pizza onto the grill, cardboard and all, closed the lid, and waited for culinary greatness. Instead, he created a smoky campfire smell that suggested someone was roasting office supplies. When he finally opened the grill, the pizza had fused itself to the cardboard like a cheese-based construction project. He attempted to peel it off, which resulted in shredded toppings, burnt paper flakes, and something that looked least like dinner and more like a cautionary tale. The instructions literally said, "Remove cardboard." 2 words. Humanity built pyramids, space stations, and the internet, and yet cardboard pizza remains an unbeatable intellectual challenge. 19. I once watched someone attempt to microwave a whole watermelon. A whole watermelon. The reasoning was apparently curiosity mixed with the belief that microwaves are just tiny indoor suns that politely heat everything. So they shoved the enormous fruit inside, slammed the door, and pressed start like they were launching a fruit-themed rocket. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the watermelon began heating internally, steam building under the rind like pressure inside a cartoon bomb. Eventually, it burst open with a wet explosion that painted the microwave interior like abstract modern art. The smell was sweet, sticky chaos. Cleaning it required tools normally associated with archaeological excavations. The person stood there stunned, as if fruit had personally betrayed them. And honestly, microwaves are incredible inventions, but even they have limits. And one of those limits is giant explosive fruit. 20. I once heard about someone who tried to make orange juice by blending an entire orange, peel, seeds, everything, and then wondered why it tasted like chemical warfare. The peel of an orange is not exactly known for its gentle flavor. It's bitter, oily, and aggressive, like the citrus equivalent of a bouncer at a nightclub. But apparently, this detail escaped him. So he tossed the whole fruit into the blender and produced a drink that looked perfectly normal, but tasted like someone had dissolved a scented candle into breakfast. His reaction was confusion, genuine confusion. Why does this taste bad? Because the orange peel is basically nature's way of saying, please don't eat this part. Juicing oranges is a process humanity perfected centuries ago. Yet somehow this man reinvented it in the worst possible way, like a scientist determined to prove lemons are actually batteries. 21. I once saw a guy try to toast bread using a hairdryer. Yes, a hairdryer. His toaster had broken, and instead of buying a new one like a rational adult, he decided warm air plus bread equals breakfast. So he stood there in the kitchen, blasting hot air at a slice of bread like he was trying to dry a tiny loaf after a rainstorm. 10 minutes passed. The bread remained pale and slightly warm, like it had just returned from a relaxing spa treatment. Toast requires radiant heat. A hairdryer provides enthusiastic wind. The end result was bread that had been gently encouraged but never toasted. He eventually ate it anyway, because after spending 15 minutes blow-drying carbohydrates, pride becomes a powerful motivator. 22. I once heard about someone who tried to cook bacon in a dishwasher. Apparently, this idea came from the internet, which is the same place where people once decided your eating detergent pods was a good challenge. The theory was that the dishwasher gets hot and steamy, which technically is true, but so does a sauna, and no one's trying to cook breakfast in there. So he wrapped bacon in foil, placed it on the top rack, ran a full cycle, and waited. When the dishwasher finished, he proudly opened it like a chef revealing a masterpiece. What he actually had was warm, limp bacon that looked like it had been emotionally exhausted by the entire experience. Bacon deserves better than this. It deserves a pan, a little heat, and a cook who understands the difference between kitchen appliances and plumbing equipment. 23. I once watched a man attempt to freeze soda in a glass bottle because he wanted super cold soda. Now physics has very clear opinions about this idea. Water expands when it freezes. Soda contains water. Bottles contain pressure. You can see where this is going. He placed the bottle in the freezer and forgot about it. A few hours later, the bottle exploded inside the freezer like a sugary grenade. Ice shards, sticky cola crystals, and glass fragments everywhere. The freezer looked like a crime scene sponsored by a soft drink company. He opened the door and just stared at the chaos, as if soda had developed violent tendencies overnight. But no, that was just basic physics, quietly doing its job while humanity continues to ignore it. 24. I once knew someone who tried to bake cookies on wax paper because they thought it was the same thing as parchment paper. Now, these two things may look similar, but one of them is designed for ovens and the other is designed for wrapping sandwiches. He slid the tray into the oven and waited. A few minutes later, the kitchen smelled like a candle factory, experiencing a meltdown. The wax paper began melting into the cookies, turning them into a sticky petroleum dessert that no living organism should consume. When he pulled the tray out, the cookies were fused to the pan like sugary fossils. Cooking often involves small mistakes. This was less of a mistake and more of a chemistry experiment that ended with baked candles. 25. I once heard about someone who tried to make popcorn in a frying pan without a lid. Now, popcorn kernels are basically tiny edible explosives waiting for permission. Heat them, and they launch themselves across the room with great enthusiasm. This person poured kernels into the pan, turned on the heat, and waited calmly. The first kernel popped and shot across the kitchen like a ballistic missile, then another, then 50. Within seconds, the kitchen became a popcorn battlefield, kernels ricocheting off cabinets and bouncing across the floor. He panicked and tried to cover the pan with a plate while popcorn rained down like festive confetti. The final bowl of popcorn contained about 6 pieces. The rest had successfully escaped into the wild. 26. I once saw someone try to soften butter by putting it directly on a stove burner, not in a pan, not in a bowl, directly on the burner, like it was a brave little dairy soldier preparing for battle. Butter melts at a very low temperature. Flames are not subtle. Within seconds, the butter liquefied, spread across the stovetop, and began smoking like a tiny dairy wildfire. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast's rich cousin. He stared at the mess, shocked that butter does not respect open flames. There are dozens of ways to soften butter: thyme, warm water, a microwave. But no, he chose the one method normally reserved for launching rockets. 27. I once heard about a guy who tried to cook a frozen turkey in a deep fryer while it was still frozen solid. Now every cooking expert on Earth has one universal warning: never deep fry a frozen turkey. Ice meets boiling oil. Oil meets physics. Physics creates a fireball. He lowered the turkey slowly, like a man approaching destiny. The moment it hit the oil, the fryer erupted into a flaming geyser of grease. The fire department arrived shortly afterward, probably wondering how Thanksgiving had turned into a special effects demonstration. Turkeys are delicious, but they do require the small courtesy of thawing before you attempt to cook them in a vat of lava. 28. I once met someone who tried to make grilled cheese in a toaster, not a toaster oven, a vertical toaster. He assembled the sandwich, buttered the bread, and slid it carefully into the slots, like he was loading ammunition. The toaster immediately objected to this plan. Cheese melted, bread jammed and smoke began rising like a distress signal. When he tried to retrieve it, he discovered that molten cheese has the adhesive strength of industrial glue. The sandwich was eventually removed using a fork and several apologies to the toaster. Toasters are designed for bread. The moment you introduce molten cheese, you've entered the realm of appliance sabotage. 29. I once saw someone attempt to make instant noodles without water, just noodles in a bowl, seasoning packet on top, straight into the microwave. Apparently, the concept of boiling was considered optional. After 3 minutes, the noodles were still dry, but now slightly toasted, like crunchy wheat twigs dusted with salt. The person stared at the bowl in confusion, as though noodles had betrayed them. Instant noodles are already the easiest food on earth to cook. They require water and heat, two things humanity mastered around the Stone Age. And yet, somehow, we still find ways to fail. 30. I once heard about a man who tried to cool soup quickly by putting the entire pot into the freezer. Now, that might sound reasonable until you remember soup is mostly liquid, and freezers are not fond of large hot metal pots. The temperature shock cracked the glass shelf inside the freezer, so instead of cooling soup, he achieved a new recipe called broth with broken appliance. He stood there holding a pot of soup, while glass fragments surrounded him like culinary shrapnel. Cooling soup slowly works fine, but patience, as we've established, is not humanity's strongest ingredient. 31. I once watched someone try to slice an avocado while holding it in their palm and swinging the knife directly toward their hand. This technique is so common, it actually has a nickname in hospitals: avocado hand. The pit got stuck, the knife slipped, and suddenly lunch became a surgical appointment. Doctors have treated enough of these cases that they could probably identify the injury blindfolded. Avocados are delicious, healthy, and apparently responsible for thousands of tiny kitchen duels between humans and knives. Somewhere out there is a fruit quietly watching humanity struggle with basic geometry. And honestly, the avocado is winning. And there you have it, a breathtaking tour of what happens when perfectly normal food meets absolutely catastrophic human decision making. Somewhere between curiosity, overconfidence, and the internet, common sense quietly left the kitchen and never came back. But I'm pretty sure we've only scratched the surface of humanity's culinary crimes. So now it's your turn. Drop your favorite ridiculous food fail in the comments and vote for the dumbest one down there, because I guarantee someone out there has done something even worse. And if you enjoy watching perfectly good food suffer at the hands of human stupidity, go ahead and like, subscribe, and stick around. Trust me, it somehow gets dumber from here.